Steve Scalise wins Republican nomination for House Speaker. Live Rep. Steve Scalise has defeated Donald Trump-endorsed Rep. Jim Jordan to narrowly win the Republican Party nomination to be Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader in Louisiana. Congressman bested the firebrand conservative Ohio lawmaker in a 113-99 vote to replace Kevin McCarthy. Party members voted behind closed doors on Wednesday morning amid questions as to whether any candidate has enough support to take the gavel. A full chamber House of Representatives vote could happen as soon as later today, though it could still be some time before a speaker takes the gavel. In January, the House went through a staggering 15 votes before Mr. McCarthy finally surpassed the vote threshold. Just 5 votes against him could put Mr. Scalise in a similar position. A closed-door candidate forum took place on Tuesday night, at which Mr. McCarthy urged his allies not to nominate him for the role again, as he also refused to endorse either of the two candidates. Neither Mr. Scalise nor Mr. Jordan made any hard promises or concessions to their colleagues during the forum, according to reports. Mr. Scalise will now need to rally the support of those who backed his rival for the role. 1905, Josh Marcus. Republican infighting may seem like a domestic issue, but Rep. Steve Scalise, whose colleagues nominated him to be the next Speaker of the House, said the process has impacts on a global scale, given ongoing crises like the Hamas-Israel war. First, I want to thank my House Republican colleagues for just designating me as the Speaker, he told reporters after the secret internal vote on Wednesday. Obviously, we still have work to do. We're going to have to go upstairs on the House floor and resolve this and get the House open again. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than one reason why the House needs to get back in gear, Mr. Scalise continued, was because we see how dangerous of a world it is, how things can change so quickly. Our first resolution that we pass under Speaker Steve Scalise will make it clear that we stand with Israel, he said. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. He pointed to how the House has passed spending bills in recent days containing military funding for Israel which remain stalled in the Senate. He also suggested that the surprise cross-border attack from Hamas on Israel underscored the need for border security changes in the U.S. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. Rep. Steve Scalise has defeated Rep. Jim Jordan to win the Republican nomination to be Speaker of the House. The vote was 113-99 according to reports from outside the closed-door meeting. A loud cheer was heard by reporters. Mr. Scalise will still need to muster 217 votes on the floor of the House to become Speaker and second in line to the presidency. This will require the backing of almost all of the GOP conference. Just 5 members could block him winning the gavel. The triumph of Mr. Scalise is especially notable given that he defeated Donald Trump's endorsed candidate for the role. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. NBC News' Ali Vitali reports that when asked about Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan as Speaker of the House, Democratic Chair Pete Aguilar said that the former is more affable and someone Democrats can talk with, whereas, speaking as a former member of the House Select Committee investigating January 6, Jim Jordan is dangerous to our democracy. 1728. Oliver O'Connell cowed. We see multiple rounds of Speaker votes on the House floor as when Kevin McCarthy was the Republican Party nominee back in January. It looks like a distinct possibility. 1715. Oliver O'Connell. House Republicans are now voting on Steve Scalise versus Jim Jordan for conference nominee for Speaker. A motion to table the rule change to bring in a 217 vote threshold to nominate the Speaker candidate has passed and it will now not move forward. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. There were 135 votes in favor of tabling the motion and 88 against. The vote threshold to win the nomination for Speaker is 111 votes. This potentially gives a significant edge to Rep. Steve Scalise. Rep. Jim Jordan has said he wanted to make sure he had 217 votes secured before going to the House floor vote. Mr. Scalise has not said that. 1653, Oliver O'Connell. New York Republican Rep. Anthony Desposito is introducing an expulsion resolution to rid the People's House of fraudster, George Santos. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. Such a resolution would require a 2/3 majority to pass and, more pressingly, a Speaker of the House to be in place. 1636, Oliver O'Connell. House Republicans are now voting to kill the rule to change the voting threshold to 217 votes to nominate the Speaker candidate, CNN's Manu Raju reports, citing members. It is currently set at 111 votes. Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News notes that if the motion to table the rule change passes, It would be a strong sign that Steve Scalise might be the next Speaker of the House. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than speaking to reporters before entering the closed GOP meeting. Rep. Steve Scalise, one of the contenders for the role of Speaker, said, "I'm looking forward to going in there. Obviously, we have a very important vote. It's really, really important that this Congress get back to work. We select a Speaker, go to the House floor, get to 218 and then get the House working again." He continues, "And the first order of business under Speaker Steve Scalise is going to bring a strong resolution expressing support for Israel. We've got a very bipartisan bill, the McCall-Meeks resolution, ready to go right away to express our support for Israel." Mr. Scalise adds, "We've got to get back to work. Today, we're going to do that. We're going to get this done." Asked if he would support Steve Scalise if he wins the GOP nomination, Jim Jordan tells CNN's Manu Raju he will support anyone who can get 217 votes. Florida Rep. Kat Cammack is not optimistic about an early result from the closed-door vote. In the session, former House Speaker Mr. McCarthy told his party not to nominate him this time round, following his unceremonious ouster last week. Instead, he read aloud the poem, "Anyway," by Mother Teresa, curiously on the topic of forgiveness, and led the party members in a prayer before quickly exiting the forum. Speaking to CNN after, he said, "I know a lot of them want to nominate me. I told them, please do not nominate me," while appearing to rule himself out. He then said that he would not give an endorsement to any of his potential successors. Continued, "Kevin McCarthy refuses to back Scalise or Jordan for House Speaker. Victoria Spartz told me she is voting, present, in the secret ballot GOP vote to nominate a Speaker candidate this morning. Rep. Anthony Desposito told me this when asked who he is voting for in Speaker race. I'm not sure yet. NY GOP freshmen will be a group to watch this AM. Dan Crenshaw also told me he's not sure who he is voting for." Time equals 400 Ms. greater than the ex-athletes accused Rep. Jordan of ignoring accusations and failing to protect them from sexual abuse by school doctor Richard Strauss, who died in 2005, when he was the team's assistant coach in the 1980s and 90s. One former wrestler, Rocky Ratliff, told NBC News that Rep. Jordan abandoned his former wrestlers. "Do you really want a guy in that job who chose not to stand up for his guys?" Former wrestler Mike Schick added. "Is that the kind of character trait you want for a House Speaker?" he asks. Meanwhile, Dunyasha Yates claimed that Rep. Jordan doesn't deserve to be Speaker and that he still has to answer for what happened to us. Early Friday morning, former President Donald Trump threw his support behind Rep. Jim Jordan in the race to become Speaker of the House. The endorsement was not entirely surprising given Mr. Jordan, an Ohio congressman, occupied the same lane in the House of Representatives that Mr. Trump has as a presidential candidate and president, as an expression of conservatives who were dissatisfied with Republican leadership and a candidate who channeled their rage. A product of the Tea Party wave and founder of the hard-right House Freedom Caucus, Mr. Jordan's tenure in the House led to the ouster of former Speaker John Boehner, which set the stage for Kevin McCarthy's downfall earlier this week, despite his steadfast support for the Speaker. In addition, as previous chairman of the House Oversight Committee and now the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he has defended Mr. Trump vociferously. Fast-talking, pugnacious and prone to inflammatory rhetoric that veers into outright falsehoods, Mr. Jordan often can be seen roaming the halls of the House not wearing a suit jacket. But he also played a significant role in Mr. Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and spreading misinformation since then. He's faced further scrutiny about whether he refused to report the sexual abuse of wrestlers he coached while at the Ohio State University. Continued, who is Jim Jordan, the conservative hellraiser and Donald Trump's choice for Speaker despite serving as House Majority Leader under Mr. McCarthy? The Louisiana Republican has a strained relationship with the Californian. In 2018, Mr. Scalise said he was interested in the speakership after the upcoming departure of then-Speaker Paul Ryan if Mr. McCarthy couldn't get the support he needed, with the relationship between the two men subsequently taking a turn for the worse. The 58-year-old Mr. Scalise served in the Louisiana State House and had a very brief tenure in the state Senate before he joined the U.S. House in 2008, picking up Bobby Jindal's seat when he became governor, grabbing the top post of the conservative group known as the Republican Study Committee before becoming Majority Whip in 2014. He served in that post for almost a decade before becoming Majority Leader earlier this year. Mr. Scalise and his top rival for the speakership, hardliner Jim Jordan, both voted to back objections to the Electoral College results that certified the victory of President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Continued. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than who is Steve Scalise? GOP leader seeks promotion in House Speaker race 1400. Eric Garcia. Here's the math. Typically the House has 435 members, but there are 2 vacant seats. One Democratic seat in Rhode Island and one Republican seat in Utah. Meaning there are currently 433 members. That means anyone who wants to become Speaker needs to have a total of 217 votes, barring a member of Congress being absent or voting present. Rep. Mary Peltola, DAK, is currently out of Congress grieving the death of her husband, winnowing the number of votes down to 432. Republicans only have 221 members in their conference, meaning that only 4 Republicans can break away from their peers' anointed Speaker and spoil the plans. And a split field makes it impossible for any Republican to get a majority. 41, Rachel Sharp. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than Nancy Mace bizarrely showed up to the House Speaker Candidate Forum on Tuesday sporting a t-shirt with a red letter A emblazoned across it. The MAGA Republican, who has endorsed Jim Jordan for the Speaker role, told reporters that she was wearing the scarlet letter as a symbol that she had been demonized at the Capitol. This week, I'm wearing the scarlet letter after the week I just had being a woman up here and being demonized for my vote and for my voice, she said in the halls of Congress. Read the story here. Nancy Mace wears bizarre, scarlet letter, a shirt to Speaker Forum 1300. Gustav Killander. The Republicans will hold their internal vote to select the party's nominee for Speaker. The vote of the full chamber may come as soon as Wednesday, but that's no guarantee that the chaos will subside. The eventual nominee for the Republicans will decide when to bring their candidacy up for a vote on the floor. In January, it took 15 votes for Mr. McCarthy to finally get across the threshold to grasp the gavel. Currently, the majority needed for a speaker to be elected is 217 votes. The GOP nominee can only lose the backing of 4 Republicans. 8 voted to oust Mr. McCarthy last week. When each House district has a representative, the number needed is 218, just over half of the House's 435 seats. The threshold of 217 may change if some members don't show up to vote or if they choose to vote present instead of aye or nay. 1200. Gustav Kiellanderson. John Fetterman, DPA, mocked the House Republicans on Monday night, comparing them to a group of clowns. 1100. Gustav Killander. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than former Republican House Rep. Joe Walsh wrote on X on Tuesday morning. Israel attacked and still no speaker. These House Republicans have proven they're incapable of governing. They deserve to lose control of the House in 2024. 10 o'clock, Gustav Killander. Bill Kristol, a neoconservative writer and former chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle, wrote on X on Tuesday that surely 5 responsible Republicans understand the country would be better served by Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker for a year than by a Republican who has to depend for his survival on GOP insurrectionists and Putinists. Former Republican strategist and Lincoln Project co-founder Rick Wilson wrote on X on Tuesday morning that the GOP Speaker's race is an exercise in humiliation. And they love it. He shared a video by the Lincoln Project, which mocked the poor Republicans, powerless to resist the whims of Donald Trump. With McCarthy out, they might think the pain is over. But they couldn't be more wrong. Congressman Mike McCall, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, urged his party to unify as, "We have got to move quickly, we cannot paralyze democracy, especially when we have hotspots all over the world," likely a reference to the erupting violence in Israel and the West Bank. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than, "I'm just worried about the messaging this sends," he said, during an interview with CNN. Last week 8 hard-right Republicans, led by Congressman Matt Gaetz, managed to oust Mr. McCarthy from the speakership. The move was largely seen as a punishment for his decision to work with Democrats to avert a government shutdown. Mr. McCall told CNN's State of the Union that it was imperative that the House choose a speaker to ensure legislation makes it back to the floor. 0700. Eric Garcia. Aside from being a right-wing firebrand, Mr. Jordan has faced serious allegations from his time as a wrestling coach at Ohio State University. In 2018, former athletes that he coached at the university told NBC News that Mr. Jordan failed to stop the team doctor, Richard Strauss, who died in 2005, from sexually abusing them. Mr. Jordan denied the allegations, saying he did not know about the abuse when he coached from 1986 to 1994. Dunyasha Yates said he told Mr. Jordan about the abuse, saying, "For God's sake, Strauss's locker was right next to Jordan's and Jordan even said he'd kill him if he tried anything with him." The New York Times later reported that Mr. Jordan called the parents of Mark Coleman, one of the athletes he coached, and asked him to change his story. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than 6 o'clock. Eric Garcia. The House Select Committee that investigated the January 6 riot found that on the 21st of December 2020, Jim Jordan and a handful of House Republicans met with Mr. Trump to discuss efforts to object to the election results, and Mr. Trump held the event to disseminate his false claims and to encourage members of the public to fight the outcome on January 6. He also admitted that he spoke with Mr. Trump on the day of the January 6 riot. In 2021, when the House organized the Select Committee to investigate January 6, Mr. McCarthy selected Mr. Jordan and Rep. Jim Banks, R.N., two allies of Mr. Trump, as two of his 5 selections for the committee. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected Mr. Banks and Mr. Jordan, which led to Mr. McCarthy pulling the rest of his members. Over time, Mr. McCarthy continued to elevate him, having him lead a subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. Earlier this year, when many critics of Mr. McCarthy opted to support him, he encouraged them to support Mr. McCarthy, saying, "I think Kevin McCarthy is the right guy to lead us. I really do, or I wouldn't be standing up here giving up this speech." In turn, Rep. Matt Gaetz, R. Florida, who nominated Mr. Jordan, said the speech made him just the right candidate to lead the House, adding, "Maybe the right person for the job of Speaker of the House isn't someone who wants it so bad." When Mr. Gaetz filed a motion to vacate this week, Mr. Jordan voted against it. 0500. Eric Garcia. Speaker John Boehner's ouster gave Jim Jordan increased political clout. During Paul Ryan's speakership, Mr. Jordan continued to criticize House GOP leadership. When Donald Trump became president, Mr. Jordan quickly became a fixture in conservative media, criticizing attempts of the deep state to undermine Mr. Trump. On the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan served as one of the chief apologists during Mr. Trump's first impeachment trial, aggressively questioning witnesses who alleged that Mr. Trump sought to have Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky investigate Joe Biden's son Hunter in exchange for aid to Ukraine as a means to help him win re-election. When Mr. Meadows left the House to become White House Chief of Staff, Mr. Jordan became chairman of the Oversight Committee before resigning that post to become chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. When Mr. Ryan left the speakership in 2019, he became a trusted ally of then Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. He also became a welcome fixture at the White House and led efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. On the 5th of November 2020, he participated in a rally to stop the steal at Pennsylvania's state capitol in Harrisburg. 0400. Eric Garcia. Jim Jordan holds few legislative accomplishments, and he criticized leaders in his own party as often as he criticized the Obama administration and Democrats. Rather than focusing on the work of governing, he focused more on raising his objections in the media. After Republicans won the majority in the House of Representatives, he turned down a position on the House Appropriations Committee, which allocates money to various programs and has long been considered the most prestigious committee in the House. Rather, he chose to lead the Republican Study Committee, an ideologically conservative focused on advancing conservative policies. In 2013, he and a handful of Tea Party conservatives teamed up with Sen. Ted Cruz, RTX, in an effort to shut down the government if Congress did not defund the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. The effort would never be successful since Democrats controlled the Senate at the time and Mr. Obama still occupied the White House. But it burnished Mr. Jordan's credentials as a conservative warrior. In 2015, he became the founding member of the House Freedom Caucus, serving as its inaugural chairman. Ultimately, his colleague Mark Meadows, a congressman from North Carolina who would go on to serve as White House Chief of Staff, filed a motion to vacate the chair during John Boehner's tenure as Speaker. The vote never came, but it was enough to end Mr. Boehner's time as Speaker. Later, Mr. Boehner would criticize his tactics. Jordan was a terrorist as a legislator going back to his days in the Ohio House and Senate, before dubbing him a legislative terrorist. 315. Eric Garcia. Jim Jordan faces tough competition against House Majority Leader Steve Scalise as Republicans seek to replace Mr. McCarthy as the House GOP seeks to unify. But with a thin legislative record and a much larger trail of antagonizing his colleagues, Mr. Jordan could face significant challenges. Prior to serving in Congress, Mr. Jordan attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he became a champion wrestler in Division I of the National Collegiate Athletics Association. Shortly thereafter, he received a master's degree from Ohio State University and a law degree from Capital University Law School, though he never took the bar exam and never practiced law, telling NPR in 2018, "I'm just a wannabe." He later served in both chambers of Ohio's General Assembly before he won a seat in the U.S. Congress in 2006. In the following years, he became one of the loudest voices in the Tea Party movement that served as a backlash to Barack Obama's presidency. 30. Eric Garcia. Former President Donald Trump threw his support behind Rep. Jim Jordan in the race to become Speaker of the House. The endorsement was not entirely surprising given Mr. Jordan, an Ohio congressman, occupied the same lane in the House of Representatives that Mr. Trump has as a presidential candidate and president, as an expression of conservatives who were dissatisfied with Republican leadership and a candidate who channeled their rage. A product of the Tea Party wave and founder of the hard-right House Freedom Caucus, Mr. Jordan's tenure in the House led to the ouster of former Speaker John Boehner, which set the stage for Kevin McCarthy's downfall earlier this week, despite his steadfast support for the Speaker. In addition, as previous chairman of the House Oversight Committee and now the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he has defended Mr. Trump vociferously. Fast-talking, pugnacious and prone to inflammatory rhetoric that veers into outright falsehoods, Mr. Jordan often can be seen roaming the halls of the House not wearing a suit jacket, but he also played a significant role in Mr. Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and spreading misinformation since then. He's faced further scrutiny about whether he refused to report the sexual abuse of wrestlers he coached while at The Ohio State University. 15. Josh Marcus. Kevin McCarthy was done in by concessions he made to the wider GOP as part of his bid to be House Speaker, including drastically lowering the bar needed to vote on his removal. It seems his potential predecessors have learned their lesson, as Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise reportedly avoided making concrete promises to the rest of the party during today's candidate forum, per CNN. 02:00, Josh Marcusides. Been years since the 2020 election, but the Republican leadership is still having trouble admitting Donald Trump lost. During today's forum, leading candidates for Speaker like Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan were asked about whether they accepted Trump's loss, and they reportedly equivocated, according to Politico. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than 145. Gustav Killander. Steve Scalise announced in August that he was being treated for blood cancer, but he said, "I feel great," when responding to questions if he was up to the job of being Speaker amid concerns about his health. He was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, calling it a very treatable blood cancer. In September, he added that his treatment appeared to be going well, saying that the cancer has dropped dramatically. Matt Gaetz, the Florida Republican whose motion to vacate led to the booting of Mr. McCarthy, praised Mr. Scalise when asked about who could be the next Speaker. "I think the world of Steve Scalise. I think he'd make a phenomenal Speaker," he said on the 3rd of October. "He'd be the type of person that I could see myself supporting." There are many people, though. While Mr. Scalise appears to be the option most likely to be supported by Republican moderates, he faced criticism for giving a speech in 2002 to a white supremacist group founded by former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke. In 2014, he issued an apology, saying that it was a mistake I regret, and I emphatically oppose the divisive racial and religious views groups like these hold. The GOP still may not have an answer. Speaking after the candidate forum let out, Rep. Steve Scalise said the party had a great discussion, but didn't comment on whether he has the votes to lead the House. "We've been building a great coalition amongst my colleagues from every swath of the conference. Obviously, we just had a great forum in the full conference. What people have really liked about my approach is I've been a unifier," the Louisiana Republican said. "I've been someone who has built coalitions throughout my entire career. We've delivered big wins. People want to see us get back on track. We need a Congress that's working." 1:00, Gustav Killander. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than addressing colleagues in a letter on the 4th of October as he outlined his reasons for running for the speakership. Steve Scalise mentioned being shot at a 2017 congressional baseball practice, writing, "I firmly believe this conference is a family. When I was shot in 2017, it was members of this conference who saved my life on that field. When I made it to the hospital and my family was told my chances of surviving were low, it was the prayers from all of you that carried us through. You know my leadership style I've displayed as your majority leader and whip. I have a proven track record of bringing together the diverse array of viewpoints within our conference to build consensus where others thought it impossible, he added. Mr. Scalise was gravely wounded in the shooting that took place as Republicans were practicing ahead of a charity game, with the recovery taking months following concerns that he might not make it through. Ahead of his announcement, Mr. Scalise said in the evening of the 3rd of October that, "Clearly within our conference, we have a very tight majority. Getting things done is going to be difficult in the tight majority. It still will be so no matter who's going to be the next speaker. The challenges still remain, but I think the opportunity is there to continue moving forward." Jim Jordan reportedly wouldn't back Steve Scalise in his bid to become Speaker of the House, even if the Louisiana Republican won his party's nomination, Punchbowl News reports. Despite serving as House Majority Leader under Mr. McCarthy, the Louisiana Republican has a strained relationship with the Californian. In 2018, Mr. Scalise said he was interested in the speakership after the upcoming departure of then-Speaker Paul Ryan if Mr. McCarthy couldn't get the support he needed, with the relationship between the two men subsequently taking a turn for the worse. The 58-year-old Mr. Scalise served in the Louisiana State House and had a very brief tenure in the state Senate before he joined the U.S. House in 2008, picking up Bobby Jindal's seat when he became governor, grabbing the top post of the conservative group known as the Republican Study Committee before becoming Majority Whip in 2014. He served in that post for almost a decade before becoming Majority Leader earlier this year. Mr. Scalise and his top rival for the speakership, hardliner Jim Jordan, both voted to back objections to the Electoral College results that certified the victory of President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 23:50. Josh Marcus. Kevin McCarthy's ouster may be the occasion for the candidate forum, but the California Republican didn't stick around long at the discussion. After reportedly reading a poem from Mother Teresa about forgiveness inside the forum room, Mr. McCarthy left quickly and said he would back whomever the party chose as the next speaker. "I know a lot of them want to nominate me. I told them, please do not nominate me," he told CNN. "I haven't endorsed anyone. I'll let the conference decide." He also criticized the far-right wing of the party that voted him out in the first place. "It's more than selecting a speaker. If this conference continues to allow 4% of the conference to partner with Democrats when 96% of the conference wants something else, they will never lead," he added. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 23:30. Gustav Killander. Former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows visited the U.S. Capitol on Tuesday. Entering the Speaker's office, he told CBS News, "I don't comment on the January 6th stuff," in reference to the 2021 insurrection which has landed both him and former President Donald Trump in considerable legal problems. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 23:15. Josh Marcus. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Rep. Michael McCall, RTX, said on Monday that the Republicans have to choose a new speaker by Wednesday. "The world is watching. They're seeing a dysfunctional democracy," he told NBC, Tuesday, 10 October 2023, 2300. Josh Marcus. Nancy Mace wore a shirt with a scarlet letter A emblazoned on the front, but she wasn't the only one engaging in a bit of out there symbolism during the GOP candidate forum. Wyoming Congresswoman Harriet Hageman arrived to the debate, which could help decide the next Speaker of the House, with a lasso. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 22:50. Josh Marcus. South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace is wearing a scarlet letter A on her shirt as the GOP candidate forum begins. She was one of 8 Republicans who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy, and she called the shirt her scarlet letter, a reference to the famous 1850 Nathaniel Hawthorne novel of the same name, about shame and an adultery scandal in the Puritan Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1600s. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 22:37. Josh Marcus. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Kevin McCarthy isn't going to try and boost either of the top candidates who could fill the House Speaker seat he was recently ousted from. Speaking with Fox News Radio on Tuesday, Mr. McCarthy said he would not get behind speaker bids from either Jim Jordan of Ohio or Steve Scalise of Louisiana. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than, from the position I am in today. Let the conference make that decision, Mr. McCarthy said. I shouldn't put my thumb on the scale. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 22:25. Gustav Killander scandal-ridden Representative George Santos, RNY, has endorsed Rep. Jim Jordan for Speaker. Lawyer and the editor of MeidasTouch.com Ron Filipkovsky wrote mockingly, "Look, I don't blame him. He needs a speaker who has demonstrated proficiency at covering up crimes. Jim's the guy." Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 2200, Eric Garcia. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than Mr Scalise and Mr Jordan still lack the sufficient votes. Lindsey McPherson, Warren Rojas and Stephen Newcomb over at the Messenger counted 43 votes for Mr Jordan and 31 votes for Mr Scalise as of Monday evening. As long as the two continue to stay in the race and unless some supporters defect to another camp, it's hard to see them getting to 217. And for those wondering about Democrats, there is little to no chance that Mr Jeffries will become Speaker. Despite the fact that Republicans voted for the rules package that made the single-member motion to vacate possible, they are still angry at Democrats for joining Rep. Matt Gaetz, R. Florida, and the 7 other Republicans who deposed Mr. McCarthy. On the flip side, no Democrat has any incentive to clean up the GOP mess and get behind a consensus Republican candidate. The House might be without a speaker for weeks. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 21:30, Eric Garcia. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. Here's the math. Typically the House has 435 members, but there are 2 vacant seats, 1 Democratic seat in Rhode Island and 1 Republican seat in Utah, meaning there are currently 433 members. That means anyone who wants to become Speaker needs to have a total of 217 votes, barring a member of Congress being absent or voting present. Rep. Mary Peltola, DAK, is currently out of Congress grieving the death of her husband, winnowing the number of votes down to 432. Republicans only have 221 members in their conference, meaning that only 4 Republicans can break away from their peers' anointed Speaker and spoil the plans, and a split field makes it impossible for any Republican to get a majority. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 2100. Eric Garcia. The battle for Kevin McCarthy to save his speakership is over. The battle for the House Republican Conference, and indeed, the entire House of Representatives, is about to begin. On Wednesday, the House GOP conference will convene to pick a new speaker. As of right now, the House has 2 major candidates: House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, the favored pick of the establishment and a prolific fundraiser with a strong whipping operation, and Rep. Jim Jordan, RO, a co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus who has spent his 16 years in Congress as a hellraiser who appeals largely to the conservative base of the GOP. Meanwhile, on Monday, after the news of Hamas's assault on Israel which left hundreds dead, and Israel's military response in Gaza, Mr. McCarthy seemed to crack the door open to once again returning to the speakership. Meanwhile, Democrats, despite internal divisions on a host of issues, are wholly united in supporting House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. But as of right now, there's a brutal truth: nobody can get to the magic number of votes needed to become Speaker. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 2045, Gustav Killander. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy has told his supporters in the House Republican Conference not to put his name forward during the nomination process on Wednesday, according to Punchbowl News. Some moderate Republicans had been planning to back the Californian because they're not happy with the current candidates, Reps Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 2030. Gustav Killander. Rep. Jim Jordan, RO, said on Tuesday that he wants the backing of 217 Republicans before going to the House floor for a vote. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. The party has been embroiled in a civil war since former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was ousted by a group of 8 Republicans led by Congressman Matt Gaetz. The MAGA Republicans moved against Mr. McCarthy shortly after he worked with Democrats to avert a government shutdown at the end of last month. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. House Republicans will debate which candidate is best served to be Speaker at the unofficial candidate forum. The Democrats are set to also hold a forum on Tuesday, but without the debate as the party has remained unified behind Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, DNY. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than. The Republicans will hold their internal vote to select the party's nominee for Speaker. The vote of the full chamber may come as soon as Wednesday, but that's no guarantee that the chaos will subside. The eventual nominee for the Republicans will decide when to bring their candidacy up for a vote. On the floor, In January, it took 15 votes for Mr. McCarthy to finally get across the threshold to grasp the gavel. Currently, the majority needed for a speaker to be elected is 217 votes. The GOP nominee can only lose the backing of 4 Republicans. 8 voted to oust Mr. McCarthy last week. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than when each House district has a representative. The number needed is 218, just over half of the House's 435 seats. The threshold of 217 may change if some members don't show up to vote or if they choose to vote present instead of aye or nay. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023. 1900. Gustav Killander. Both the House GOP leaders and rank-and-file Republicans agree that neither Mr. Scalise nor Mr. Jordan can win a floor vote as of this moment. Just over 60 members of the caucus have so far made public endorsements, according to CNN. The conference will meet at 5 p.m. on Tuesday in the Ways and Means Committee Room in the Longworth Building on Capitol Hill, where Mr. Scalise and Mr. Jordan will address the party during a candidate forum. The internal House Republican vote to choose a new speaker has been scheduled for Wednesday, the 11th of October, and following the attack on Israel by Hamas, the vote is now more urgent in order to get a speaker in place to allow the House to respond properly. Reps Brian Fitzpatrick, RPA, and Chip Roy, RTX, are pushing for a rule change that would require a candidate to get 217 votes within the GOP conference before heading to a vote on the House floor. Mr. Jordan and his backers are in favor of the change while Mr. Scalise and his cohort are against it, Punchbowl notes. Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry, RNC, the temporary holder of the post, said during the Monday night meeting that more than 100 members back the rule change. Some Republicans have argued that the rules should be changed to hand more powers to Mr. McHenry to allow the House to be able to respond to crises even after a speaker has been ousted. Mr. Scalise and Mr. Jordan are set to meet with the House Republican delegation from Florida, which has 20 votes, at some time on Tuesday. On Sunday afternoon, Mr. Scalise met virtually with the House Freedom Caucus, the group that Mr. Jordan met with on Friday. Both Mr. Jordan and Mr. Scalise have also been trying to get the backing of more moderate Republicans, telling them that they would prioritize efforts to get them elected even as some of them represent districts won by President Joe Biden in 2020. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1830, Gustav Killander. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than House Republicans are hoping to choose a new speaker within the next 24 hours, but nothing is clear about the outcome as the conference remains divided and enveloped in chaos. Neither of the candidates, Louisiana Republican Rep Steve Scalise and Ohio Republican Rep Jim Jordan, are close to having majority support within the House Republican Party, and are even further away from reaching a majority on the floor of the chamber. On Monday night, the House Republicans met for a meeting in the basement of the U.S. Capitol as they shared their frustrations following last week's ouster of then-Speaker Kevin McCarthy. While Mr. McCarthy, who didn't attend the meeting, has said he isn't a candidate for the post, he has kept the door ajar to possibly returning. 3 members, Reps John Duarte, RCA, Carlos Jimenez, R. Florida, and John Rutherford, R. Florida, said during the meeting that they would only back Mr. McCarthy, according to Punchbowl News. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Republicans also slammed the 8 members of the party who voted to oust Mr. McCarthy, with 2 of them leaving the meeting early and avoiding speaking to reporters. Beginning on Tuesday, members of each party will have closed-door discussions to determine potential nominations within their caucus before the House holds a formal vote on Wednesday. All eyes will be on the chamber as the unprecedented election gets underway to replace Mr. McCarthy, who has become the first speaker to be removed through a motion to vacate. There's no telling how long it will take for the House to elect a new speaker, given the last election required 15 rounds of voting before Mr. McCarthy claimed the gavel. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1730. John Bowden. Kevin McCarthy's time as Speaker of the House came to an unceremonious end on Tuesday last week, as the GOP leader found himself summarily defeated and humiliated by longtime rival Matt Gaetz. The House of Representatives is now in chaos. There is no leader determining a path to the floor for legislation, no leader among Republicans setting an agenda for the weeks ahead, and no one to be the face of the lower chamber of Congress in budget negotiations with the White House and Senate. Republicans are not set to begin elections for their next leader until next week, as it has become increasingly clear that no one in the caucus currently has the support that would be necessary to actually win election to the post. Steve Scalise and Tom Emmer, the Majority Leader and Whip, respectively, are seen as his two most likely replacements. But neither has launched an official bid yet, and Mr. Gates has made it clear that the road ahead will be no easier. Asked by reporters on the steps of the U.S. Capitol after the vote whether he would demand concessions from any GOP speaker similar to those he extracted from Mr. McCarthy in January, Mr. Gates replied affirmatively. He also answered a question from The Independent by indicating that he would seek to force the GOP caucus to move forward expeditiously with a series of votes on budgets that are likely to fail in the Senate. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1700, Gustav Killander. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Sen. John Fetterman, DPA, mocked the House Republicans on Monday night, comparing them to a group of clowns. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1630. Gustav Killander. Former Republican House Rep Joe Walsh wrote on X on Tuesday morning, Israel attacked. And still no speaker. These House Republicans have proven they're incapable of governing. They deserve to lose control of the House in 2024. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1600. Gustav Killander. Reps John Duarte, RCA, and Carlos Jimenez, R. Florida, said during a closed GOP meeting that they would only back Rep Kevin McCarthy, RCA, for Speaker ahead of Wednesday's Speaker election, according to Punchbowl News. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1530. Gustav Killander. Bill Kristol, a neoconservative writer and former chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle, wrote on X on Tuesday that surely 5 responsible Republicans understand the country would be better served by Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker for a year than by a Republican who has to depend for his survival on GOP insurrectionists and Putinists. Former Republican strategist and Lincoln Project co-founder Rick Wilson wrote on X on Tuesday morning that the GOP Speaker's race is an exercise in humiliation. And they love it. He shared a video by the Lincoln Project, which mocked the poor Republicans, powerless to resist the whims of Donald Trump. With McCarthy out, they might think the pain is over, but they couldn't be more wrong. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Congressman Mike McCall, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, urged his party to unify as, "We have got to move quickly, we cannot paralyze democracy, especially when we have hotspots all over the world," likely a reference to the erupting violence in Israel and the West Bank. "I'm just worried about the messaging this sends," he said, during an interview with CNN. Last week 8 hard-right Republicans, led by Congressman Matt Gaetz, managed to oust Mr. McCarthy from the speakership. The move was largely seen as a punishment for his decision to work with Democrats to avert a government shutdown. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Mr. McCall told CNN's State of the Union that it was imperative that the House choose a speaker to ensure legislation makes it back to the floor. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1400. Gustav Killander. Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News reacted to Kevin McCarthy's Monday press conference, writing on X that, "It's very clear from this news conference that McCarthy wants to be speaker again. He says he'll let the conference decide who unites them. He isn't directly addressing what he would do if nominating, saying it's a decision for the conference," he added. Many of McCarthy's allies have endorsed other candidates, but McCarthy is doing nothing to discourage his allies from nominating him. Rep. Nancy Mace, RSC, who voted to oust Mr. McCarthy, wrote that, "If the former speaker had spent as much time going after Chuck Schumer for not taking up our DoD military spending bill as he is attacking other Republicans, he wouldn't be the former speaker." Mr. Sherman noted on Monday that Mr. McCarthy inches closer to saying he wants to be speaker. He says 96% of the conference supports him, and the rest of the conference is being held back by a handful of those opposing him. Keep in mind, neither Jim Jordan nor Steve Scalise are even close to 217/218. Not close. The number of undecideds is amazingly high, Mr. Sherman noted on Monday afternoon. Tuesday, the 10th of October 2023, 1300. Gustav Killander. Matt Gaetz mocked the notion of bringing back Kevin McCarthy to the speakership after New York Rep. Mike Lawler told reporters that, "There are a lot of people who believe Kevin McCarthy is the right person to lead us." Mr. Gaetz noted that, "A lot of people is still fewer than the 218 votes required to grasp the gavel. The story of Kevin McCarthy is the parable of the appeaser, the man who keeps feeding morsels to the crocodile hoping it will eat sufficiently well that it won't gobble him up in its deadly jaws, but, snap, eventually it does. And with one sickening crunch on Tuesday afternoon, the teeth of the ultra-MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives sunk into McCarthy, and he was done. Well and truly chewed up and spat out by the people he'd spent 9 months bowing down to, accommodating, and trying to please. Unlike the UK system where the Speaker is essentially a kind of referee, the neutral umpire upholding the Commons rules, it is more instructive to think of the Speaker of the House of Representatives as akin to our Prime Minister. You are responsible for deciding what legislation to introduce, directing what the House committees investigate, and just like the PM, the Speaker is chosen by the party that holds a majority. And after the 2022 midterms, that was the Republicans, with the squeakiest of majorities. McCarthy's long-cherished dream was within sight. Congressman, you say that you stand with Israel, you're ready to defend Israel, and yet you're completely incapable of helping Israel because you've brought Congress to a standstill, a state of paralysis, have you not? She asks. Mr. Gates, who introduced the motion to vacate Kevin McCarthy, leading to a historic vote that resulted in his ousting as Speaker, replied that Secretary of State Antony Blinken had rejected that premise. Ms. Welker pushed back, saying, he didn't reject it, Congressman. He called Congress to get back to work. Matt Gaetz denies House Speaker turmoil may hinder response to Israel. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Tuesday the 10th of October 2023 10 o'clock. Gustav Killander House Rules Chair Tom Cole, ROK, told Politico that the GOP no longer has to abide by a previous spending deal cutting back appropriations made last June with far-right members of its caucus. This agreement was faulty from the beginning. It's changed over time, and now in a sense, it doesn't exist at all because McCarthy isn't the Speaker anymore, Mr. Cole said. So we're not really bound by this agreement now. That will be an interesting thing the new Speaker will have to hash out. Tuesday the 10th of October 2023 9 o'clock, Gustav Killander. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than the Lincoln Project shared a mocking video of Republicans blasting their own party members for removing Kevin McCarthy from the speakership. What do you think his Speaker tombstone should read? The Lincoln Project wrote on X Tuesday 10 October 2023 8 o'clock. Gustav Killander Rep. Brendan Boyle, DPA, introduced a resolution which would require a Speaker of the House to be a member of the chamber, a move that would block former President Donald Trump from assuming the role. Res. .761 would amend the rules of the House of Representatives to limit the eligibility for nomination to serve as Speaker of the House of Representatives to members and members-elect of the House. Rep. Jason Crow, DCO, wrote on X on Monday that the Republicans must call House back into session immediately. Our national security can't wait. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Tuesday the 10th of October 2023 6 o'clock. Gustav Killander Alexander Vindman, one of the top witnesses in Donald Trump's first impeachment, wrote on X on Monday that the disarray in U.S. politics and the chaos wrought in our government, a non-functioning Congress with no Speaker and hundreds of military promotions on hold resulting in inadequate staffing in many critical commands, has invited our enemy's aggression. The left-leaning magazine Mother Jones wrote in a piece on Monday that Speaker candidate Rep. Jim Jordan, RO, was one of only a handful of congressional Republicans who actively conspired with Trump to overturn the election results. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than as he runs for House Speaker. Republicans appear eager to ignore that. Yet by embracing Jordan they tie themselves further to that attack on democracy and the Constitution. Jordan was an early and enthusiastic recruit in Trump's war on the Republic in reality, in public and in private. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Tuesday the 10th of October 2023 4 o'clock. Gustav Killander ousted Speaker Kevin McCarthy didn't rule out returning to the role atop House leadership if enough members of his party would be willing to back his comeback. Appearing on Hugh Hewitt's radio program on Monday, Mr. McCarthy said, "Whatever the conference wants, I will do." At the press conference shortly after his removal on Tuesday, Mr. McCarthy said, "I will not run for Speaker again. I'll have the conference pick somebody else, but as it's unclear if anyone will be able to reach the required 218 votes, Mr. Hewitt asked Mr. McCarthy if he would put his name back in contention to break a deadlock. "Look, the conference has to make that decision," Mr. McCarthy said. "I am going to be supporting Jim Jordan for Speaker," the South Carolina Republican said on Face the Nation on Sunday. She applauded Mr. Jordan's work ethic and his ability to just run circles around everyone with regards to policy and pushing forward. We've been one of the least productive Congresses inside of 30 years and he's going to be a workhorse for our country, she added. I want a speaker who will keep their word and who will get the job done, Rep. Mace said. She was one of only 8 Republicans to vote to oust Mr. McCarthy from his post last week in a historic vote. Since the vote, Ms. Mace said she's being threatened by her Republican colleagues to be removed from committees and the conference.